Hey guys, so welcome back to another Adobe Premiere tutorial. This is part 2 of the 3-part Adobe Premiere Crash Course where I go over the basic components of Premiere just to get you started on editing. As always, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for future videos and follow us on social media, links in the description. If you have not seen part 1 of the series yet, I highly recommend you watch that. It will also be in the description. Alright, enough talk, let's keep this tutorial going. When you're editing, you want to be fast but also accurate, so you got to be efficient. So in order to be efficient, you're going to need shortcuts. I already have some shortcuts made, and we can go here into the edit tab and click on keyboard shortcuts. And again, it looks a little bit intimidating, but let me tell you, I've only used like this section over here. I have my own presets made, so just to kind of skip it and have you experiment, I'm going to leave a download of my keyboard shortcuts in the description. So if you want to copy my shortcuts and just download them and import them into Adobe Premiere, you can do that super easy. And like any program out there, you can do the classic control copy, control paste. So we're going to do a control C and a control V, and notice how we already made 2 different clips. Just a copy paste, very simple. We can use the mouse scroll wheel to scroll up and down the timeline. So one of my favorite shortcuts is the 1 and 2. 1 to expand the timeline to see the timeline as a whole, further out if we have more clips. And then 2 to kind of zoom back in, if we need to see some waveforms, we need to see frame by frame. That's how I'm going to do it, using 1 and 2. And you could change that to be any shortcut you want when you customize it yourself. Now on the left here, we have some icons and some tools. First thing here is the selection tools, which is bounded to my V key. And this is just to click around. Let me just import another clip here. So this would be just to click around. That's the tool we're using right now. The next one is going to be the rate stretch tool. It's kind of hidden. You kind of have to click on this and hold it. And this is the rate stretch tool. Now this one is kind of cool. You can take the end and shorten it. Now this will allow it to make it faster or slower. So I've kind of shrunk it down so make the clip shorter than normal. So right now it's at 262% speed, which is kind of cool if you wanted to like match exactly to certain kind of music or whatnot. But we're going to undo that change. So it's at regular speed now. Actually, I'm going to take this one out too. And then under here we have the razor tool, which is my C key. And this is really useful in terms of cutting clips. Let's say you only want from this section to maybe like this section. We're going to go back to the selection tool and we're going to take this and we have a whole separate clip right here. And what's cool on the timeline, if you cut everything out, we can take the ends of each clip and kind of restore them. And then the rest of this stuff I don't really use all that often. We have the hand tool, we have the pen tool. Again, experiment, just play around with it, open up a new project and just click around, see what each of them do. But I'm just showing you guys what I use most. So the next one over here is the lock, and I use this sometimes. My sister has a little bit better of a habit of using it. Locking the track doesn't allow you to touch it at all. You can't move it. Sometimes you already have a certain track that you don't want to touch or you don't want to move, like maybe the music track, and you could lock them up so you don't accidentally move something. And then we have sometimes the toggle track output, which disables the track. So if you want to check things out, what it would be like if you took the track out, everything else in the timeline would show except this track. We have the mute. Now I don't have an audio clip here, but let me just pull one in real quick. And we're going to expand it right here, double click. And if we play it back, you can hear the music going, but when you click mute, it mutes the track. And then we have the icon solo track, which just makes this the only track playing. I only have one track right now, so it doesn't really matter. I don't really use this one that much, but that's what it does. And then next to that, I'm going to go on this track. We have a voiceover record, so this would be where we would be recording our voices if you need to. Make sure if it's blank and you don't see any waveforms, if you want to check your preferences, you can check the audio hardware of what you're recording with. Make sure it's the correct one, the input, but that's what it does. And then after that, we're gonna have something called snap. Now I love snapping, like it makes everything so much easier. So what snapping is essentially is if you turn it off, it won't snap to like the edges, and if you turn it on, it'll show you kind of guidelines, and it just helps everything align better. You know, it's much more convenient if we can snap the edges together. So let's say we're editing a vlog, and this is something I do all the time. So if I import a clip, it's gonna have some audio, it's gonna have some video in it, right? And there'll be just one big clip. Now, what we could do if we want to separate the audio, let's say we don't even want it, instead of just clicking on it and deleting it, you know, you'll delete the whole thing. So instead we would do unlink, and that will unlink the audio from the video. You know, we can add some background music on there, we can add, you know, whatever audio we wanted to, but that's just if you don't want the audio anymore associated with the video. Now you can also do the same thing if you highlight them both. You know, you could do a drag and highlight them on the timeline, right click and do link again. They'll be linked together once again. So this is a little bit more for advanced use, but let's say we want to kind of group and nest things together. Let's say we have another clip here. I'm just gonna do a copy paste, you know, copy 3 of them. But now that we have 3 of them, we can highlight all 3 of them and nest these all together, and that will create one entire clip. Now if we double click on it, it will open another sequence, and we can show the 3 individual clips that we nested before. But this is a little bit more advanced use. Most of the time you won't use it unless you're like nesting effects together, but I'm just showing you guys that that option is available to you. And then lastly on the timeline, here's something that I love doing, which is messing with the speed and duration. Now this is where we can get our slow motion going, we can make the clips faster, we can make them reverse and whatnot. But let me show you just real quick how to do maybe a 50% slower. Now if you're doing slow motion, check out my other tutorial on how to do it. Now depending on what you're recording, let's say like 60 FPS, then you know, if it's 60 frames, then if you want to slow it down halfway, then you're gonna at the most be rendering in 30 frames per second. Same thing here, we can do reverse speed, we can use the time interpolation. Frame sampling is by default what you see. Now if you do frame blending, it's gonna blend some of the frames together and show like some motion blur. And then if you do like optical flow, or analyze some frames and put some keyframes in there that maybe it's missing to make it look a little bit smoother. I like to keep mine with frame sampling, and I like to keep the speed at the perfect math. And that's it for the timeline. There's so many buttons you can click, but once you get a little bit hang of it, it's so easy. I mean, the basics at least. So we're gonna move on to right here, and let me bring back the audio clip. But this section over here will show you your audio levels. And if we would play this track back, and as you can see right here is where your audio levels are at. If it reaches up here, it's going to start showing some red, and that's when you know it's blowing out. I'm gonna drop that decibel level all the way here. So this is good for measuring your audio, seeing how loud all your clips need to be, you know, leveling everything out to make it consistent. This is where we would monitor all your audio. All right, moving on past this, we're gonna look at the preview, or what I like to say, like the TV section of your editing. This is where you will see all your playback. So first thing we're going to look at is the zoom level. I usually keep mine at fit because it'll just fit your clips based on your sequence size. But if you want to change it up to maybe like 200%, you know, you want to look into certain details, or maybe even like 400%, right? You can change it right here. Next thing we're going to do is the play button. Now you could just press spacebar, but whatever shortcut you have it, I have mine as spacebar. This is basically your playback controls. Again, we have your markers. You can add a marker here. It would be the same thing as adding a marker here. Same idea. Let's say you're playing it back, you're like, wow, this clip looks good, this clip looks good. Or like, damn, that looks like a really good thumbnail. What do I do? How do I get a picture of that? Well, we can take a picture clicking on this icon right here, this camera icon. We can click export frame, and then here we can name the file whatever we want. So let's say we want to name it thumbnail. We can click the format, do whatever we want. I would prefer PNG. We can choose to import it into the project. Usually I don't. And then here's the path on where it would save, and then click browse if you need to save it elsewhere, right? So, and then we click OK, and it would save the thumbnail for us. So here on the right side, we can change the playback resolution. Now this is super helpful if your computer is a little low on memory. Instead of clicking on a full resolution, maybe you could do like 1/2. So when it plays back, it's not like 100% quality. And then we could even do 1/4. And it'll be a little bit more pixelated, but your computer will run a little bit faster. And then here, if we click our settings, these are all your settings for your playback. Again, I don't really touch most of these, but what I do touch is the playback resolution, which is the same as the drop down on the right side, and also the pause resolution. So when you pause, it's a little bit different than the playback. Since we're paused right now, we're at full resolution, but we can change this to 1/4. And as you can see, when you're paused, you can see the resolution at 1/4 essentially. I like to keep mine at the same thing so it doesn't look like, you know, the frames are being dropped or anything. So keep mine at full resolution. And then right here, I would like to enable high quality playback. I don't really see much difference with this. If your computer is slowing down, I suggest you just turn this one off. And again, I would suggest, you know, just going through these settings, have a little fun with it, just see what everything does. If you guys are interested, I can make a more advanced tutorial. Maybe you want to know what Adobe Immersive Environment is. But today we're just going through the basics. This is going to be a crash course to just get you started. And yeah, that's basically it in terms of like the settings that I touch for the playback. Alright, that's it for this Adobe Premiere tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching. If this video helped you out in any way, make sure to give it a nice big thumbs up and leave a comment on any suggestions you have. Don't forget to check out the final part of the series when it's out, and as always, take my words with a grain of rice.